Hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Self-Publishing Insiders. I'm Jim Azevedo, and I lead the marketing team here at Drafted Digital. And today it is my privilege to welcome to the show Isabelle Knight of Build Your Author Brand. Isabelle, welcome.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you so much. I've been looking forward to this conversation ever since we met.
Yeah, it was, yes, ever since we met back in November. Let me tell everybody that story. But first, just to kind of set the groundwork, Isabelle, I want to share your bio with everybody because you have a pretty interesting bio. So Isabelle is a former publicist to the stars, including titans of industry like J.K. Rowling and the BBC. She's the founder of Build Your Author Brand, which is an online consultancy helping fiction and nonfiction authors to grow your readership, raise your profile, and give your books the best chance of success. So today we're going to talk about all things about building your author brand and bringing your books to the world. And with that, let's talk about how we met. So I remember we bonded over our PR backgrounds at Author Nation. We were walking to dinner, several blocks in Las Vegas. And you and I were kind of at the back of the group, and we started just bonding over our careers and how we got into PR and what it meant. So I wanted to ask you, just right out of the gates, what do you think authors most underestimate about publicity and branding?
Well, that's a brilliant question to kick off with. And I don't know if it's so much underestimate. I think, first of all, there is a lot of fear and perhaps some suspicion around publicity and PR for authors, particularly in the indie author self-publishing world, where I think a lot of authors, it's no accident that I don't tend to use the words PR or publicity very often, which you might find surprising.
I don't find it surprising, right? Because what I'm so used to it that I forget that a lot of people don't even know what public relations means or what PR is or what the purpose of it. So maybe we should back up a bit and just
this is very apt. I don't know if I mentioned to you already. So I'm actually at I moonlight as a university lecturer when I'm not running the Build Your Author Brand and working with authors. So I actually teach communications students about what is PR and what do we mean by PR and publicity. Okay. So, because there's always a massive education piece around this. So when I talk about build your author brand, and even the word brand is also confusing for authors, because straight away they start thinking, oh, that's my logo, that's my image, that's my picture, that's my presentation. And yes, of course, all of those things will make up part of your ultimate brand. But when I use the word brand, I mean, first of all, what do you say about yourself as an author and about your books in a way that speaks to your ideal reader, to your target reader, target readership? And what is it that you're saying about yourself and as the author and your books that, first of all, places you in a unique position in the market, that sets you apart from your competition, sets you apart from others in your genre? The book, when you kind of line up your book against all of the others that may be same genre, maybe similar tropes, maybe similar covers, similar fonts, all of those things that we think about when we think about the brand. But what's setting your books and your author brand apart from all the rest? And what is it that your readers are going to associate with you and are going to remember you for? Because ultimately, PR and publicity is first and foremost about building reputations and about creating the presence within your market that speaks to your target audience. Essentially, is what it means. So, but often when I say PR and publicity, because there's so much that isn't known about it, and I think people often think, oh, you mean talking to the media or being in the press or becoming a star or becoming famous. And I think for many indie authors, often that's the last thing they want, is to have to be famous and do that and be visible and be seen by loads and loads of people. I think often that's the opposite.
Yeah. One of the key words that you mentioned during your explanation, your very concise explanation there, was association. And it's like, how do you associate your category with who you are and the audience that your books are meant for? And I think that's so important. I wanted to ask you, sort of as a follow-up to that, what lessons from, say, traditional PR translate best to authors, do you think, and what doesn't translate?
So the lessons that translate to authors, and this is where I begin when I work with authors, is to when I first say this, I know that often this makes me sound like a really mean person. But when I say you want to let your readers know why should they care about your books, and I don't mean to sound callous or rude or mean with that. You care about your books, as you should, but we need to translate that to your readers. So why should they care about your books and take a chance on your book and pick up your book when there are so many that they can choose from? And if you're an author starting out, sorry, I'm reading a couple of the comments, which we should come back to. But when you're an author starting out and you're building a readership from scratch, you're not famous, people haven't heard of you. So what is the thing that is going to kind of launch that for you? Not becoming famous, but starting to become trusted and known so that readers will take a chance on your books. So the first thing that I do with authors, which is absolutely a kind of the biggest PR lesson, really, even though I don't talk about PR as we've said, but I turn it into language that I think authors can relate to. So is that what are you saying about yourself in your books? What's the story of you and your books that you're sharing with your readers? Because what we can't do, and I know authors often want to be able to do this, they want to be able to just, we'll let the book speak for itself. We'll let the book just sell itself. Yeah, we write the book, we do a great cover, we put it on our social media, or we put it out there, we put it online, we put it on Amazon, and
we say it's for everybody.
And we say everyone's going to love this. You're all going to love this. And that's often the first. Again, I'm not being rude, but the first fatal error that authors will make. And and if you don't know. When you don't know, you don't know, and you think, I'm just going to put the book out there and people will go for it. But of course, what we have to do is tell people why they should go for it.
Yeah. Perfect. You kind of answered this question already. I think you already saw it too, Isabelle, but I'm going to bring up a comment here from Nigel. And we appreciate this, Nigel. He says, I'm working on this right now, so this is excellent timing. A tiny part is a consistent look, but mostly it is, what am I about? What is me?
Exactly. And I think someone there has said, Nigel, he said it isn't philosophical. We've got a debate going, is this philosophical? It slightly is philosophical, but we want to turn that into the real, which is, who are you? And this is the big question that I get authors to try to answer, because it's not easy doing this, and it takes some thinking. But why are you writing what you're writing? What has motivated you to write the books you're writing, and why could only you have written the books you've written and not somebody else? Because these are the things that are going to set you apart, and these are the things that will go towards creating your unique author brand, or you uniquely as an author.
Perfect. I'm going to jump into another question here. Usually I ask all the questions, and I feel really guilty about it because I'm trying to catch up with the questions from our audience. So apologies, viewers. That's why I'm going to try to hop in a little early. This one from Beth. Hi, Beth. I appreciate this. She says, I'm playing around with the idea of starting a second pen name, but some of the branding and building feels tiring, exhausting even. Do you work with, I assume that you work with authors who may have several pen names.
Absolutely. And Beth, this is a fantastic question. It is a question that tends to come up because, there are a lot of authors out there who are writing under several pseudonyms, pen names, and this is a question that comes up. So when we're creating our author brand, and we start with who are you as an author and why are you writing what you're writing? And what I ask authors to do is to think about what are the themes that you explore in your writing. If we can start to identify, what the themes that you talk about, or the questions that you're trying to answer in your work, whatever that looks like. And some of the I think every author has certain things that they are working through with their writing. And obviously that looks completely different for everyone. And what you'll find is if you are writing in different genres, if you're writing under different pen names, think about, and this might seem counterintuitive, but think about what do all of your pieces of work have in common with each other rather than what makes them different from each other. If we can start to see what ties your work together, then we can start to see what the central author brand is. And here's another concept that goes with that. When a reader comes across one of your books and they fall in love with it, they're much more likely to enjoy your other books, even if they're written under a different name in a different genre. So one of the reasons why I tend to, when I work with authors who are writing different works or under different names, we come up with one central author brand and author brand story, and then the different pen names and the different genres can kind of form little arms off their central author story, so that when a reader, they might discover you through one of your pen names, they're much more likely to want to read your other work. And what we definitely don't want to do is leave money on the table and leave readers kind of stranded and hanging because they haven't joined the dots and realized that actually you've got these other books that might be written under a different name in different genres. So having one central author story that your different pen names can kind of branch off, and you may well be targeting different kinds of audiences with those different names and different books, but we still want to create that central kind of starting point. I hope that makes some sense.
I think it makes perfect sense. It's like having a through line that goes throughout your entire brand.
Yes, exactly. And what it will do, because what I see happening with authors that are trying to spread themselves thinly across their different genres, pen names, is you start to feel like you have to kind of fracture yourself, and like you say, Beth, it feels tiring, it's exhausting trying to juggle all of these different things. So what I'm saying is it's not a case of having to split yourself into several pieces and build a new brand for each of your pen names. It's about adapting and using the central brand and then adapting it as you want to, and not feeling like you have to become several different people at once.
Okay. I like that. That makes perfect sense. I wanted to ask you sort of an origin story question and then get into a couple more questions from our viewers that I think would tie right into this. And that is, how did your experience working for major names like J.K. Rowling and the BBC lead you to building your author brand?
So
a little bit off camera before we went live.
Yes. So I started, I was a publicist, which is, being a traditional PR, so generating press coverage, making noise, generating buzz around launches. And I worked in movies, TV, books. So, I've worked with very famous people and people that were just starting out and starting to make names for themselves. And the one thing you learn when you have to rep people and and IP and entertainment products, what you learn is you always have to start with, what's the story? What are we saying to the audience? And in the case of a publicist, you're always pitching a story to someone. You're pitching a story to the press. You're pitching a story to, collaborators, funders, whoever it is. So you're always having to look for what's the golden nugget in this. Yeah, like what's the hook, but what's the thing that's really going to resonate with the audience? How are we going to sell the story? So that's essentially what I'm bringing to working with authors, because when I started working with indie and self-pub authors and understood that most indie authors don't have the resource and the access to work with a publicist. I mean, that's that's a major luxury for most authors, because big publishing houses pay a lot of money for their authors to work with publicists. But how could I help authors to essentially start to do this for themselves, to teach you how to think about it, help you to pull out your own story, and then guide you to use it without having to do the kind of traditional way of working. Okay. So that's essentially how.
Okay. I was going to bring up another author question real quick, but first, let me ask you this question, and then we'll get into that next question. I think it'll flow even better. It has to do with brand versus platform. So how should authors think about the difference between their brand, their marketing channels, and their platform? What is platform?
What is platform? That's a great question. So I think these terms get confused, and I think often they get interchanged.
I agree completely.
Yeah. So I think, authors worry about, I don't have a platform. But so in short, if we look at the brand first, what are you saying about yourself and your books, and how are you presenting that to the world? Then we can start to use that to build the platform. And platforms, when we get into marketing channels, and what I generally say to authors when they're starting with this, authors say to me, do I need to be everywhere doing everything, to build a platform? And a platform is essentially how your audience, how your readers are going to discover you. I would say that's probably how we might define the platform. How are you being discoverable? How are you being visible? But before we can decide, this is going into kind of bigger conversations really, but before you can decide where your platform is or what you're going to use for your platform, it's really important to know who you're trying to speak to and who your reader is and who your audience is. Because I never ever do a one size fits all advice for authors ever. It's always entirely dependent on who are you as an author, what's your book, what's your genre, what's your fiction, non-fiction, whatever it is, and who is your ideal reader. So only once we've figured out those things, and what are we saying about you to let your ideal reader know that your book is for them, then we can start to worry about which channels and where should I be building my platform.
Okay. I love that. I want to keep pulling on this thread. But I promised I would get to some of the questions from the audience here. I can't be selfish. But I want to get back to something that you just said about finding your specific ideal reader, because I don't want that to go. So we're going to come back to that.
Yes. Okay.
But first, a quick question from Carrie Show 2. Appreciate this question, Carrie. She asks, are you going to cover the technical part of where we would put this information such as about the author or social media? Yeah. What do you think about that?
Yeah, brilliant question, Carrie. So the practicalities then. So once if we've written our author's story, that's what I tend to do is get authors to write this down, write down how did you come to be writing what you're writing? Tell us about you, tell us about the background, tell us about how you got here. So once we've got all of that, and we've got something in there which is showing, who you are, what your values are as an author, what you're talking about in your writing, not what the book is about or what's the plot summary, none of those things, but who are you as the author. Then the first thing we tend to do is put that on. Your website is a great place to start. So I think most authors tend to prioritize having a website. So that's a great way to start to have a kind of shop window that readers can come to if they've never read a book, they've never come across you before. They land on the website and straight away here is, telling them everything they need to know about you as the author, and are your books going to be for them? And ideally, with the author information that you're giving, you want to leave your reader wanting more. So they're going to read about you as the author, read about what you're about, why you're writing what you're writing, and then say, great, I want to know more. And then they're going to go and pick up the book. That's the kind of the trajectory that we want the reader to make. And then with social media, once you've got clear on your author story, what are you saying about yourself and your books to set yourself apart, then we can start to use those things in your marketing content, whatever that looks like for you. So whatever we've decided on that ideal reader question, who are you trying to reach? And the phrase that I like to use is, where are your readers hanging out? Okay, and I can clarify what we mean by that. But you want to reach those readers, you decided who they are and where they are. So that's where we're going to start putting into our content, into the marketing content, all of the things that we've come up with about who you are as an author and what you want to say with your books and who it's for.
Perfect. Thanks again for that question, Carrie. That was a good one. Here's another good one for you. From Layla Bell. She asks, if an author is looking to change their brand or pivot to a new type of content, are there ways to leverage your existing brand so you aren't starting from scratch again?
Yeah, absolutely is the short answer. That is a great question. So remember what we said at the start of the chat, that often when we say the word brand, often authors are thinking, oh, it's logos, images, all of these things. So if you're going through a rebrand and you're changing the whole look of something, you're changing the whole the aspect, the positioning, the magic of the author's story, and kind of coming back a little bit to what we were saying about having different pen names, is when you've got a strong author story, it's going to apply to all of your work, to everything that you're writing. So you don't need to start from scratch to do a rebrand. You might adapt slightly if it's a different audience, a different readership that you're going after, and and you're changing the whole, like I said, the whole look, the whole aspect. Mm-hmm. But you don't need to start from scratch on knowing who you are as an author and what's driving you as an author. Those things should be able to root you so that you don't feel like, oh my God, I've got to start this whole thing all over again.
Well, good answer. Here's kind of a follow-up question to that, or a related question to that, I should say. This is from Flapper Girl. She says, in relation to social media and multi-pen names, websites, etc., do you think it is better to have the author pen names or the book's name as the brand, or should an author have both?
Okay, right. This is a good question. So Flapper Girl, right. So social media and multi-pen names. So if we're saying we've got multi-pen names and each of those names has its own social media account and its own website. So the way I explain this is, you've got one. So say you've got one umbrella author brand, which is you might never share that publicly, but that kind of foundation author brand is underpinning all of these pen names and all of the books. So where we've got, is it better to have the author pen names or the book's name as the brand, or should an author have both? So the book's name. So do we mean, for example, if we have a series of books? So we can say that a series of books becomes its own brand, but the author behind those books has their own kind of umbrella brand or foundation brand behind it. Yeah. So each series of books, or a single book could have its own brand, because remember that a brand essentially means what is it known for, what's it remembered for, and what's associated with it. That's essentially what we mean by brand. All of the imagery, the logos, and everything else, that's kind of, we've got the visual side of it, and we've got the kind of intellectual, cerebral side of it. But what do people remember is the bit that we want you to kind of worry about first. So yeah, so in short, each of those things could have its own brand, but we want to underpin it.
Gotcha.
Yeah, with the story. Yeah.
Okay. And it kind of relates to what S.G. Livingston says here. He says it can also be, or she, sorry about that. It can also be a good move to stick with one author name and brand from the perspectives of libraries and bookstores, recognizing your name and being willing to stock your books.
Yes, exactly. So, you know, where we've got famous examples of authors who've written different series under different names, when it comes to actually selling their work either through bookstores, ensuring that readers keep coming back through libraries, then those people running those stores and those libraries definitely want to know what the author brand is behind that set of books, behind that series, even if it's under a different name. So, you know, which again is another great reason. So thanks for sharing that. It's a very good point. Another good reason to not try to fragment your brand too much and try to build lots and lots of brands that are all completely standalone. You know, it's in your interests to try to wrap them together to an extent.
Okay. Perfect. Okay. Finally, let's get back to the an additional topic that we were talking about just a couple of minutes ago, about how you counsel your clients and authors to understand who their specific ideal reader is.
Yes. So the ideal reader, we get to the ideal reader once we've articulated what is your work really about, what motivates you to write, what are the values, the themes, the big questions that you're dealing with in your writing. That once we've done that, it leads us directly to the ideal reader. And in many cases, in most cases, the ideal reader is going to be a version of the author themselves. So you could be writing for a version of you as the author in terms of, you know, what you love, what you're passionate about, what really means a lot to you. And it could be a younger version of you, it could be an older version of you, it could be a male version of you, a female version of you. So what we're really doing is working out, once you know what your work, why it means so much to you, and the questions and themes that you're working through, then we're going to understand why it will mean so much to your ideal reader, so it leads us to them.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
That's not easy to do, especially or to explain in a 45-minute conversation here. There's so much more to it. And Isabelle froze, so she could probably hear me because this happened to us when we were off camera, or she might be gone for the remainder of this conversation. We'll figure it out. Let's see. I'm going to go down to another comment here. Actually, I'm going to go to my next question here. We'll see if she comes back. Let's see. Okay. So if Isabelle comes back, I was going to ask her about practical strategies for authors, and if an author is starting from scratch, like what are the first 3 things that they need to do to build from scratch. And I don't know if she's going to come back. So let's keep it going here, you guys. I appreciate your patience as we work out technical difficulties here.
Can you hear me, Jim?
I can hear you just fine.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry about that.
I was stalling.
Good.
I was getting the next question ready. So
great. Good. Okay. So the 2 things go hand in hand: the ideal reader and understanding who you are as the author.
Perfect. Okay. I like that. I'm looking at the clock, and I have so many more questions I want to ask of you. The selfish Jim here. Let's say if an author, I love this so far. So if an author is starting from scratch, what are the first, maybe let's say 3 things that they should start to do to build their brand?
Okay. So when we say starting from scratch, have they got a book yet? So what I tend to say is, because people say to me, oh, when is it too early? You know, when is it too soon for me to start creating an author brand? Right. And I say, I tend to say to authors, once you have a first draft of a book, if you've never published a book before, you've never finished a book before, you've got your first draft, then you can start to do this. And I always say the earlier you start to sell or to build a readership and start that kind of pre-selling process for your book, the better. So once you have a first draft, then you can start to think through the questions that we're going over. So what are you actually writing? What's the book about, and what has motivated you to write this book? And often when if you've written your first draft, that those kinds of things are going to be fairly fresh in your mind, that what has motivated you to write this book, to get that far. So if we can start to articulate that, then we can really think about, and who are you writing it for? Who is the reader going to be? And then we can start to use that in your content, and figure out what platforms, what marketing you're going to do from that point.
Okay.
So if you've got a first draft, then you can start to do this.
Do you recommend, like, authors, hey, you get your website done before the book is released to the public, or start building your newsletter before your book is released to the public, or do you just want them all in on getting that book done first?
So I say before you publish and before you start trying to sell your book, start thinking about, who are my readers going to be? Where am I going to find them? So I would say you don't have to have a newsletter and a website and all the social media set up, but pick one thing and start there. If you can start sharing content and start letting potential readers know who you are and know a bit about you, so that they can start to invest in you and want to get to know you and want to get to know more, so that when you do publish that book and you start selling it, they're already following you, they're already interested, and they think, oh great, the book's out now, I can read it. So that's the kind of process that you want, ideally. Okay. But it's not about having to be everywhere straight away. It's, pick one thing that you're going to do to start sharing a bit about who you are and why the books, why you're bringing the books out.
I just heard a big collective sigh of relief, like, because I think a lot of authors, especially those who are aspiring, they're trying to fill themselves with knowledge and expertise from everybody who's been there before, but it gets to be so noisy, and then they start to feel like they have to do everything, and that creates a sense of being overwhelmed and then being paralyzed by, like, not knowing what to do first. So that's really good advice.
And like I said before, it's never a one size fits all. It's never, a kind of box ticking, oh great, we have to do that, we have to do that, we have to do that. And remember this as well, lean into what you enjoy doing and what you're good at. Some people love to talk to people in person and do events. Some people love to, if all you want to do is write, and maybe long form articles or blogs are your thing, or some people want to do video, some people want to be on social media that's fast moving and they're just having conversations with people all day. Think about what you enjoy doing, because if I say to an author, oh, you should go and give a talk in a library and meet your readers, and some authors say, oh my god, I don't want to meet my readers, that fills them with absolute terror. Yeah. And other authors, that can't think of anything worse than having to be on social media all day, every day. So don't set yourself up for something that you're going to hate doing, or that doesn't lean into, to who you are as a person and what you might enjoy doing. Marketing is is something that we have to do, as Jim will attest. Marketing is something that it doesn't stop. Like it's continuous. It keeps going. It's not a box that we get to tick and say, all right, I've done my marketing now I can move on to something else. It doesn't work like that. So if you want to sustain your marketing practice, to support your writing practice, then do something that you are able to sustain.
But Isabelle, if I'm enjoying my work, then it's not work. I should be working harder, you know?
No. I mean, Jim and I met at a conference over dinner, and that didn't feel like work, I don't think, to either of us. But right. but we're still out there, and we're making connections, and we're right. we're presenting ourselves. So always, if it doesn't feel like work, I think that's a great thing. That means that you're enjoying something about it, and it doesn't feel painful.
Exactly.
So if you can, yeah.
I was just gonna say, you don't have the Sunday night blues. You're looking forward to getting back into it the next day, and that is, that's everything.
Yeah. I mean, I see authors on social media all the time saying, I just want to write. No one becomes an author in order to be a marketer. Nobody wants that, or very, very few people become authors in order to become marketers. But the reality is that if you want other people to read your book, and that aren't just your friends and family, you are going to have to market it. You're going to have to find a way that works for you, and find a way that you can keep going with. And don't be tricked or fooled into thinking that just because one thing is working for another author, that it's necessarily going to work for you, which is why I never, ever say all authors should be doing this. Or, I mean, I wouldn't even say all authors have to have a website,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's not absolutely necessary. It doesn't mean that you won't get a readership if you don't have a website. Obviously, it's one of those tools that is fairly universal, and the vast majority of authors will have a website. But the point, just making the point that it's not necessarily doing what, if everyone does this one thing, that's going to be the magic bullet. There are no magic bullets.
Gotcha. Yeah. And I couldn't agree more. And a lot of authors want that magic bullet. And we always advise authors that, hey, if you only have time for one thing, then make it about the book, because it's a word of mouth industry. It always has been. It always will be. And what's going to really make a book take off virally, it's people talking about it. I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about positioning. Positioning is a little different than branding, especially when it comes to different genres, especially genres that are crowded. So how can authors differentiate themselves in crowded genres or niches?
So this is where we really have to lean into, when, for example, I mean, romance is a huge category, massive genre. So, but we can't ever say that all romance readers are the same and all romance books are the same. We have, an infinite kind of number of subcategories of romance. We have new categories being recognized all the time within a massive genre. So it's about getting really, really specific and saying, what is my book? What is your book? Not what's this, what's it about? Yes, but what are you saying with your book, and who is the book for? So being absolutely specific. Are you writing about, is your book about middle-aged people finding second loves? Is your book for young people who are at the beginning of their lives? Get really specific about what is the book and who is it actually for, and who's going to enjoy it. And the more specific you can get, then the more differentiated you will be, and the clearer you will get on your readership. And to be honest, differentiation and positioning is all about having a relationship with your specific readers. And the closer a relationship you can cultivate with your readers, the more differentiated you become. And then you stop worrying about what everyone else is doing, because you're just concentrating on your own readers, your own readership, your own market, and you're not worried about what all the other romance writers are doing.
I love that. That is such a perfect answer, because the more that I think this is what sets indies apart, because they have this close connection with their readers that helps them to refine their positioning more and more and more and more. And it's not just, I think when authors think about positioning, it's not just like, here's the description of my book. It's everything. That's just one small part of it. I I like to visualize it like a bullseye, like a dartboard, where the like the outside of the dartboard is just fiction, and then you go into romance, and then you go into paranormal romance, and the closer you can get, the more you can laser focus on that bullseye reader that you're trying to.
Yes. And you can absolutely and invent your own market. You don't, it doesn't have to match categories that you've already come across. I think that's the other thing, is I think many authors are afraid to say, a lot of authors think they have to pigeonhole themselves into a recognized category. You don't have to do that.
Yeah, don't do that, because if you felt like that, then romantasy wouldn't be a thing.
Yeah. And in another few years, there'll be more categories that we haven't.
Right. There will be more categories.
Particularly, that's the exciting about the indie world. Yeah.
And I was going to say it too. It's not just about your book's description. It includes the metadata. It includes your book's description. It includes your cover image, because your cover image is a great piece of positioning, because right there in your cover image, in a fraction of a second, your readers should know exactly what that book is. And that cover image is giving them a promise. And that promise is like, this is exactly the book that you're looking for. This is exactly it. This is the exact story. These are the exact characters, and so forth. Okay, I want to make sure I don't miss anybody's comments or questions.
Yeah.
Hey, I just want to pause for a second and say, great questions today, you guys. We really appreciate you interacting with us and submitting your questions here. Oh, here's a good one for you, Isabelle. When it comes to audience building, do you have a specific framework for growing a readership, not just followers? Or maybe another way to put it is, like, how do you take a follower into becoming a reader, and a reader becoming a fan, and a fan becoming a super fan?
Yeah, a super fan. That is a brilliant question. So remember what we said about nurturing relationships, and that's really what this is about. So a follower is someone who doesn't, you don't know each other yet. A super fan is someone who feels they really know you, even if they don't actually know you very well, but they really feel that they do. And it's about from the journey from a fan from a follower to a super fan is essentially that relationship has been nurtured. So they feel much closer to you, and you start to get to know them, they start to get to know you. So what we really want is to bring them along that journey. So it's inviting them into your world, getting closer to your world. So that's why, things like having a social media platform that then you're bringing people off that platform into your newsletter list, when you can actually talk to them directly through a newsletter. That's when people start to get to know you more. You're sharing more about who you are, about your books, and that process of getting people onto a newsletter list. Always think about, what can you offer those readers or those followers? What can you offer them? It's not about what can they do for you. Yes, they can buy your book, but what can you do for them to invite them into your world and into your kind of inner circle, your close circle, and creating this sense of a community and people getting to know you. And that's where the gold is with the super fans, who, once they become super fans, they will follow you, they will buy everything you ever write, they will, they'll shout about you to their friends. And that's what we really want to do, is to get that word of mouth spread. And that's when the whole process repeats itself. So what you want is your readers, your fans, telling other people to read your books. Once that starts happening, then we know that we're really starting to build a proper readership.
Where's the balance, though, Isabelle, when it comes to audience building? What I mean specifically is, how much should authors share about themselves versus how much they share about their books?
So when I say sharing about yourself and your author's story, I don't mean that you have to share all of your personal details, all of your personal life. You're always in control of what you share. So that's why getting clear on who you are as an author, and I'm really specific about that, is who you are as an author, not who you are as a person. So what we're essentially doing with our brand, with our author brand, is deciding what the author brand is going to be. So what is the public you going to be? The you of the author you that you share with your audience and that your readers are going to get to know. So you're effectively deciding, you know, who is that person and what are we saying about them? So getting clear on why you're writing what you're writing and what you're really writing about is so important, because then we can really flesh that out, and it's not about having to give up all of your personal history, you know, all of your personal life. And I think, again, that's something that people get very confused by and very kind of caught up in, don't they? About feeling like they have to share their entire lives online, and that's not what this is.
Yeah, definitely not. We're getting toward time here, Isabelle. I could talk to you all day. I love this. But in your experience, what do most authors wish they had started doing earlier?
Most authors wish they'd started really paying attention to who their readers are earlier, I think, and being much more intentional, rather than starting off by saying everyone is going to love this book, getting really specific about exactly who is going to love your book.
Intentionality.
Being very intentional about it, and not leaving it to chance and you know, to the right readers finding you by accident, but really thinking about that and backing yourself by kind of, honoring for yourself who you've written your book for. And I think that can be quite a difficult thing for authors, especially if that's the first time you're thinking about that. I think in many ways it's easier to say everyone will love my book. I've written a romance, all romance readers will love it. And of course that's never true. That's never going to be true. So get really specific, and I think that can feel quite scary, can't it, for people?
Oh, absolutely. And it's something that I hear at conferences over and over and over again. I wish I would have, back in my early career, just kind of focused down.
Yes.
But that's hard to do at the beginning, because number one, you're so proud of yourself for coming to the end of a manuscript and you don't quite get the audience building aspect of it yet, but you're focusing on your craft.
Yeah, that's right. And of course, that's the thing. There are lots of things to focus on, aren't there? And so many things to learn. But if you worry less about the kind of mechanics in the beginning, and worry less about what social media platforms will have to do, and I've got to set this up and I've got to set the website up, etc. Worry more about who am I writing for? Who is the reader that I want to read this book? That would be my advice.
Gotcha. Okay, I was going to ask you as a final parting shot, if you can give authors one sentence of branding advice, what would it be? But I think you just did it.
Yeah. So, but to kind, really, it's sit with yourself, and I don't know, Jim, if there's a way we might be able to share a couple of prompts here, but think about these questions for yourself. Think about, why are you writing the book you're writing? Why you, why now, and why at this particular moment in time, and why are you writing that particular book, and why are you writing that particular book? So if you can try to think about those questions, that would be the thing I'd urge you to do next.
Perfect place to end this conversation and to land this plane. If any of you out there watching or listening want to learn more, check out buildyourauthorbrand.com. There's a ton of advice and resources on Isabelle's site out there. So check it out. And, Isabelle, if you wanted to create, or if you wanted to send me a few prompts, I can add those to the show notes later on. So that people can come back to this conversation and see those things, and then navigate over to the website to learn more. This has been really fun, and I knew it was going to go by in a flash. because it was just so fun talking to you at dinner in Vegas. We were just like, blah, 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 blah. I felt like I knew you for years by the end of that conversation. It was a lot of fun.
It was that kind of, it was definitely. And thank you so much for having me. And thanks to everyone that's been watching and for all the comments. I'll have to go back and read through what everybody's been saying and some of the questions. But thanks so much for having me, Jim. And it's a pleasure to meet everyone.
Oh, it's been so fun. It's been so fun. To our audience out there, I just want to thank you guys again for joining us week in and week out. And special appreciation to those of you who are listening perhaps for the first time or watching for the first time. If you enjoyed this conversation, if you could share it with your author friends, we would really appreciate it. It helps us kind of spread the word out there and get guests just like Isabelle to come and join us. If you want to see who our future guests will be and future topics, you can bookmark d2dlive.com just to see what's coming. And finally, if you are investigating self-publishing, perhaps for the first time in your career, you can sign up for a free account at Draft2Digital simply by visiting draft2digital.com. That's going to do it for us for this week. Isabelle, if you've got a minute, hang out backstage. I'll meet you back there in a second. For everybody else, we hope to see you here again next week. And until then, have a great end of your week and weekend. We'll see you next week. Take care, everybody. Bye.
Ebooks are great, but there's just something about having your words in print. Something you can hold in your hands, put on a shelf, sign for a reader. That's why we created D2D Print, a print-on-demand service that was built for you. We have free, beautiful templates to give your book a pro look, and we can even convert your ebook cover into a full wraparound cover for print. So many options for you and your books. And you can get started right now at draft2digital.com.